In this episode, we focus on a skill that separates wishful security programs from sustainable ones, evaluating resources and metrics so you can calibrate scope, pace, and ambition. Security work is full of important ideas, and it is tempting to believe that if something is important, it must be done immediately and completely. In real organizations, however, time, attention, money, and people are limited, and trying to do everything at once usually creates burnout, resentment, and half-finished controls that do not actually reduce risk. Calibration is the practice of matching what you want to do to what you can realistically execute and maintain. Resources tell you what capacity you truly have, while metrics tell you what is happening in reality and whether your actions are making things better. When you combine them, you can choose a scope that is achievable, a pace that the organization can absorb, and an ambition level that pushes improvement without breaking operations. For a beginner, the key idea is that a good plan is not the plan with the most items. It is the plan that delivers steady risk reduction over time. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Resources include obvious things like budget and headcount, but in governance work, resources also include less obvious elements that can be just as limiting. One resource is skill, meaning whether the people involved have the knowledge to execute and operate the control reliably. Another resource is time, not just for the security team, but for every team that must adopt the change, because adoption time is a real cost. Another resource is tooling maturity, meaning whether your systems and processes can support the control without constant manual effort. Another resource is leadership attention, because some changes need active sponsorship to succeed, and sponsorship is a limited asset. You also have resource constraints that come from operational load, such as ongoing incidents, urgent projects, or business cycles that consume attention. Beginners often assume security can simply add more steps, but every additional step has a cost in attention and friction. Evaluating resources means making those costs visible so you do not design a program that looks good on paper but fails under the weight of everyday work. Scope is the first calibration lever, and it answers what you will and will not attempt in a given period. A wide scope might include many systems, many teams, and many controls, while a narrow scope might focus only on the highest impact services or the most urgent gaps. Choosing scope is not about being timid, it is about being strategic. If you have limited resources, a narrow scope that is well executed can reduce more risk than a wide scope that is poorly adopted. Scope also includes depth, meaning whether you will implement a control at a basic level or at an advanced level. A basic level might be defining ownership and minimum standards, while an advanced level might be automation and continuous measurement. Beginners should learn that depth can be staged, where you start with a minimum viable control that works consistently and then improve it over time. This staged approach protects against the common failure mode of aiming for a perfect solution and delivering nothing usable for months. When scope is calibrated, progress becomes visible and trust increases. Pace is the second lever, and it is about how quickly you introduce change and how much change the organization can absorb without disruption. Pace is not only about how fast the security team can work, but how fast the rest of the organization can adopt new behaviors. If you push too quickly, teams will feel overwhelmed and begin ignoring messages, delaying adoption, or creating informal workarounds. If you move too slowly, risks remain unaddressed, and stakeholders lose confidence that security can deliver. Calibrating pace requires understanding the organization's change capacity, which includes current projects, staffing, and the complexity of the environment. It also requires planning for communication, training, and support, because those activities take time and cannot be skipped if you want adoption. A beginner-friendly way to think about pace is that every change needs a runway. Time for awareness, time for practice, and time for feedback. When you respect the runway, your program feels steady rather than chaotic, and that steadiness itself becomes a form of resilience. Ambition is the third lever, and it is about how far you intend to move the organization's security posture over a period of time. High ambition can be motivating, but it can also become unrealistic if it ignores constraints. Low ambition can be safe, but it can also become complacent if it fails to address real risk. Calibrating ambition means choosing goals that stretch the organization in a realistic way, where success is difficult but achievable. This is where metrics become essential, because metrics can show you what is currently happening and what improvement would look like. If your current incident response time is very slow, a goal to cut it dramatically in a short period may not be realistic without major changes. If your current logging coverage is minimal, a goal to reach complete coverage instantly may not be achievable. Instead, ambition can be staged, such as improving coverage on critical systems first and then expanding. A well-calibrated ambition level creates momentum because people see progress, and progress creates confidence. Metrics are often misunderstood by beginners as just numbers to report upward, but in a mature program, metrics are steering tools that guide decisions. A metric is useful when it helps you decide whether to continue, adjust, or stop an approach. Good metrics also connect to outcomes rather than activity. For example, a metric like number of training completions is an activity metric, while reduction in repeated policy violations is an outcome signal. Both can be useful, but you should know which one you are using and why. Metrics should also be understandable, because if stakeholders cannot interpret the metric, it will not influence decisions. Another key property is reliability, meaning the metric is collected consistently and reflects reality. A metric that looks precise but is built on incomplete data can mislead you and create false confidence. Evaluating metrics is part of calibration because you need trustworthy instruments before you can steer. A helpful way to organize metrics is to distinguish leading indicators from lagging indicators. Leading indicators are early signals that suggest future outcomes, like how quickly critical patches are applied, how often access reviews are completed correctly, or how many systems have essential logging enabled. These can help you detect drift before an incident occurs. Lagging indicators are outcomes that show what already happened, like incident counts, downtime, or confirmed data exposures. Lagging indicators matter because they show impact, but they often change slowly and can be influenced by many factors. A balanced metrics approach uses both, so you can track early movement and ultimate outcomes. For beginners, the key is that you cannot wait for major incidents to tell you whether your program is working, because that is a painful and unreliable feedback loop. Leading indicators let you make adjustments earlier when fixes are easier and cheaper. When you evaluate resources and metrics together, you can choose initiatives that will move leading indicators in the right direction within your capacity. Another concept that supports calibration is understanding the difference between measurement and measurement overhead. Every metric has a cost to collect, validate, and interpret, and if you choose too many metrics, you can create a reporting burden that steals time from actual improvement. The goal is not to measure everything, but to measure the few things that best reflect your priorities and guide decisions. For example, if you are focusing on resilience, metrics around backup success and restore testing might be more valuable than a long list of minor compliance checks. If you are focusing on access governance, metrics around privileged access changes and review quality might be most useful. Beginners should learn to avoid vanity metrics, which look good but do not change decisions. A vanity metric might show lots of activity without showing risk reduction, like counting how many emails were sent about security. In a calibrated program, metrics are chosen because they support control, not because they fill a dashboard. When you reduce measurement overhead, you free resources for meaningful action. Resources also include the ability to sustain what you implement, which is often the hidden challenge. A new control that requires constant manual work may be possible during a short launch period, but unsustainable long-term. When it becomes unsustainable, it will be skipped or degraded, and degraded controls can create a false sense of safety. Calibrating scope and ambition, therefore, includes maintenance planning, such as who owns the control, what routine tasks are required, and what happens when key staff are absent. For example, if you introduce a review process, you need to ensure there is a cadence, reminders, and accountability so it does not quietly disappear. If you introduce a monitoring process, you need staff who can handle alerts and a way to reduce false positives. Sustainability is a resource question because it involves ongoing time and skill. Beginners can think of this as the difference between building something and operating something, because operation is usually where programs succeed or fail. A strategy that lands is one that the organization can keep doing even when things get busy. Calibrating pace also requires paying attention to organizational feedback signals, because those signals show whether change is being absorbed. Feedback signals might include rising volumes of help requests, increased exception requests, delays in approvals, or confusion in how teams interpret requirements. These are not reasons to abandon improvements, but they can indicate that the pace is too fast or the communication is unclear. Metrics can capture some of these signals, but qualitative feedback matters too, such as what managers report in meetings or what teams say in follow-up sessions. A mature program uses feedback as data, not as complaining, and adjusts accordingly. For example, if a new policy causes a spike in exceptions, the program might need better guidance, a clearer definition, or a process tweak that removes unnecessary friction. Adjusting pace does not mean weakening security. It means shaping the path so adoption remains strong. Over time, this adaptive approach produces better results than stubbornness. When you combine resource evaluation with metrics evaluation, you can create realistic plans that include trade-offs, and trade-offs are unavoidable in security. You might choose to cover fewer systems in the first phase so you can achieve deeper quality and reliable adoption. You might choose to delay a complex initiative until foundational visibility is improved. You might choose to focus on one high-impact capability, like recovery, because it reduces multiple types of risk at once. These decisions become easier when you can point to resource constraints and metrics that show where risk is concentrated. Beginners should see that trade-offs are not failures. They are responsible choices made under constraints. A program that admits trade-offs openly can plan for them and revisit them later as resources change. A program that pretends trade-offs do not exist will make promises it cannot keep and will lose credibility. Calibration is a form of honesty that protects both security outcomes and organizational trust. A practical output of this calibration process is a roadmap that matches initiatives to capacity and uses metrics to define what success looks like at each stage. Even without getting into implementation detail, you can describe that early stages focus on establishing consistent foundations and visibility, while later stages focus on optimization and advanced capabilities. You can also define checkpoints where you review metrics and decide whether to expand scope, increase pace, or adjust ambition. This checkpoint idea is important because it prevents programs from drifting. It also creates a rhythm that stakeholders can understand, which makes governance easier. For beginners, it helps to think of these checkpoints as moments to ask whether you are getting the expected risk reduction for the effort spent. If yes, you can scale. If no, you adjust. The presence of checkpoints shows that the program is managed, not improvised, and that is a quality leader's value. Evaluating resources and metrics to calibrate scope, pace, and ambition is ultimately about building a security program that can actually live inside a real organization. It respects that security is not the only priority, even when it is very important, and it uses evidence to decide what to do next. It also protects the people doing the work by avoiding impossible workloads and constant emergencies that cause burnout. When a program is calibrated, it makes consistent progress because it does not overpromise, and it learns because metrics and feedback guide adjustments. Beginners should leave with the understanding that calibrated ambition is more powerful than unbounded ambition because it produces real adoption and durable controls. Over time, calibration builds a culture of steady improvement, where security work feels like a normal part of how the organization succeeds. That is what it means to make strategy real, and it begins with the discipline to match plans to resources and to steer by trustworthy metrics.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.